Good morning, everyone. My name is Miss Sparks. I am the admissions associate at Lick-Wilmerding High School. I am also an alum. I graduated in 2014, and this is my third year working at the school. So I've been at the school for now almost 7 years. Thank you for joining us today at our Valuing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Lick-Wilmerding High School event. We're very happy to be here. We have 4 student panelists joining us today and 2 faculty panelists joining us. And they are going to introduce themselves. Please introduce yourself with your name, your year, your pronouns, and the previous middle school that you went to if you're a student, and anything else you'd like to add.
I can start us off this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Primo. I am a senior. I use they, them, and him pronouns. I went to Honolulu Waldorf School for middle school in Hawaii. And I am student inclusion chair for this year at LWHS.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael. I am a senior. I use he, him pronouns. I went to Keys Middle School, which is a small independent school. And I'm one of the co-leaders of GSA, which is our Gender and Sexuality Awareness Club at Lick.
Hi everyone, I'm Sujeen. I'm a junior. I use she, her pronouns. I went to St. Cecilia School, which is a K-8 parochial school, and I'm a co-leader of Asia, which is Asian American Students in Alliance.
Hi everyone, I'm Juliana. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior. I went to San Francisco Friends School, which is an independent school in the city, and I'm co-president of Latinos Unidos.
Hi everyone, I'm Carrie Maslow. I'm on the science faculty. I went to middle school outside of Washington, D.C.
Hey everyone, I'm Yeshi Gusfield. I'm a history teacher at Lick. I went to middle school in Oakland, California, and I also am a co-facilitator of the white faculty anti-racist group called Interrupting White Supremacy.
Thank you so much, panelists, for introducing yourselves. So everyone, again, thank you for being here. Today we're focusing on the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So to start us off, most of us are familiar with the definition of diversity. So I want to provide 2 concrete definitions of actually equity and inclusion that was given to us by our Director of Adult Equity and Inclusion, Dee Johnson. We'll be using these definitions as working definitions to help us, or to help guide us through the rest of this panel. So for equity, we define that as fair, unfettered access and support that equalizes the probability of all constituents in a community to thrive. And that will be put in the chat in a moment so that folks can see. But Primo, I wanted to see what you thought of that definition. What resonates with you? What are some of the words that stand out for you?
I definitely do resonate with that definition. In my position on student council, I definitely have to think a lot about the differences between equity and inclusion, which I'm sure when you say speak about your definition of inclusion, we will see some of those differences, but some of the words that ring out to me are definitely unfettered access, probability, and that distinction between equity and equality, because it's about people getting what they need and deserve based on who they are as human beings, as opposed to giving everyone the same thing.
Definitely, thank you. Yeshi, do you have anything that you'd like to add on, or is there anything that resonates with you in this definition?
Sure. I mean, I think I would just piggyback on everything you both just said. And as a teacher, what that looks like is really just trying to meet students where they are at, as opposed to assuming that all students have the same experience with the different types of assignments. So that means being accessible to students after class. It means allowing some level of choice or flexibility in assignments so that students kind of bring themselves to the assignments as opposed to just sort of a one size fits all. Yeah.
Would anyone does anyone else on the panel have anything that they'd like to add after hearing this definition of equity? Maybe what is something that resonates with you? How do you feel about this?
I'd like to add one thing. I feel like where it shows up most in a science classroom is around equipment and graphing and reading scientific text, and that it's difficult to do but important to do to figure out people's starting point, because otherwise, like, the word fair resonates. So, it's not fair to judge on the same end product if the starting point was radically different. So that's how it shows up for me most in my teaching.
Thank you for sharing. Great. So the next definition we're going to talk about is for inclusion. And this will be put in the chat as well. Inclusion is a sense of belonging that correlates to community members feeling personally accepted, respected, included, and supported by others in the school social environment. Sujin, what about this definition resonates with you, and what are some of the words and what are some of the feelings that come to you when you hear this?
For me, the words accepted, respected, and supported really resonates with me. I feel like, especially coming from like a queer POC perspective, going somewhere where it's very diverse, you want to feel like you're not just like there to make it diverse. It's like everyone accepts you and is there to always like be by your side and like be always there to support you, which I feel like is really important. Yeah, I feel like at Lick especially, there's a lot of like clubs, like I said, there's affinity spaces that help you kind of develop your own identity and feel supported from all types of aspects and backgrounds, from students and faculty alike. And I feel like in that kind of environment, like, you just are able to be yourself and like grow, which I feel like is very, very important. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel that. Juliana, would you like to add anything like about your feeling of inclusion and what that might mean and resonate with you on?
Yeah, for sure. I really felt inclusion is about like hearing like all perspectives. I know I'd like my middle school. I was there from K through 8, and for the majority of the time, I was one of two, or like one of three Latinos in the whole grade. And for me, that was at the beginning when I was like really young, it was kind of like special because it made me unique. But as I got older, it kind of ostracized me, not in the sense that, not intentionally, not from teachers, but it's more from like my own peers, where like I feel like I couldn't relate to them. And then coming to Lick, I really felt that I was able to seek out a community that I felt comfortable in, and finding other people that were like me, and also people that weren't like me. And we share the same core identifiers, and we have like nothing in common. And even that is special because it's diversity within like diversity in that sense. And I found a lot of like great friends, and yeah, I guess inclusion is about like inclusion of a lot of different kinds of people, and not having a stereotype for one ethnicity or one core identifier.
Yeah, definitely. And you brought up actually a question that we received from our question and answer earlier this week about the transition from middle school to high school, and like what are some of the differences that you've seen in DEI work from your middle school to now being at Lick. So the exact question is like, how would you compare the diversity, equity, and inclusion at Lick to what you experienced in your middle school? And Juliana, I think you hit on that, but would anyone else like to speak about this? And then maybe teachers, what are some of the difference that you've seen with our work on DEI at Lick compared to the past institution that you worked at?
I can jump in and share a little bit about my experience in middle school. Yeah, I was similar to Juliana. My middle school didn't like have affinity spaces or like foster like microcosms within our middle school community for students to feel accepted and respected. And so coming to Lick and like having these affinity spaces was like a brand new experience for me. Like I had never been to a racial affinity group before. And it was at first like a little bit scary. Like I was like, like this is kind of crazy. Like I've never been in a space where like all these people share my core identifiers. And so it was like a little jarring at first, to be honest. But I think, like as I worked up the courage to like, like find acceptance within these communities, I found that like feeling respected by the folks in these spaces just like empowered me so much, and it made me feel like the Lick community really needed me. Like I was a central part of this community too, which made me feel really nice.
This question is a challenging one for me. I, before working at Lick, taught at Berkeley High, which is a public school in Berkeley, and at Envision Academy, a charter school in Oakland. And this is my first experience as a teacher with a private school. And the only other private school I went to as a student was for college. And I think the thing that strikes me most is that our entire school system is really pretty broken and unequitable, and that we have a concentration of resources in certain public schools and in private schools, and that there's this division of resources. So it's hard for me to answer like, what are we doing differently than what was happening at the public and charter schools that I've worked at. I think like as a nation, we're really struggling with equity, and I think Lick also is. And we have quite a bit of diversity in terms of core identifiers represented, especially for a private school. But it still feels like a school that's wrestling with some of the pretty serious inequities that our nation is wrestling with in terms of how people actually feel supported. And I don't want to speak for students, so I just want to raise that like Lick is not a perfect place, but what I do think is valuable is that there is not a lot of shying away from the conversation, and that can be really useful, and I think attracts a lot of people to the school that are interested in pushing the racial and social justice reality in this country forward. But I also think that it can create a little bit of a tension on campus where you have people that are expecting a very high level of equity and inclusion and then get here and feel somewhat disappointed. And I think that that's a tension that comes with the like lofty rhetoric of, the diversity that we try to promote and the diversity that we try to support, that when you have this lofty rhetoric of equity and inclusion and a school for all, the same way as when you have lofty rhetoric of, all men are created equal, right? You have to live up to those expectations. You set a higher standard for yourself. And I'm not sure that Lick always meets that standard. But I would say, what's valuable is that the conversation is very alive. So.
If I could just build off of what Ms. Gusfield just said, I definitely also recognize that, when you set a higher standard, there's a lot more work that has to be put in, but something that especially like me in my position this year, I'm seeing is that that work is being put in, and that's something that I really appreciate about specifically students at Lick. I mean, in the students on this panel and a lot of my fellow student leaders. And I think that Lick really does provide a space for student leaders to step up and make their voices heard, and from that for change to occur. And this resonates with something that I was talking with a prospective student about through our Tiger Ambassador program, where they were asking similar questions. And something that came to mind was that looking at what student leaders are doing now, I felt confident in telling this student that by the time you get to Lick, it will be a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive space because of the work that all of our student leaders are doing right now, work that I'm a part of, work that I'm overseeing and helping to facilitate. And that feels really beautiful to be able to tell a student that and then turn around and work on that work to be able to make sure that future students will feel accepted and included in the school community.
Carrie, I saw you had a hand. Would you like to respond to?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, that over the time I've been a teacher at Lick, who the students are looking at in front of the classroom as their teacher or as leaders has changed significantly. And that I think that that's been intentional. I know that it's been intentional. Like I remember the year when they decided that the group of the department chairs had to have term limits. So you couldn't just be a department chair for 30 years, and that was deliberately to move people of different identifiers into that group. Our administration has changed in number of people and identifiers so that it's more representative. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of change in that. And also the student body has changed, and that's been intentional, I'm sure, on admissions side.
Thank you, everyone. I have chills. Like, I'm not supposed to be a panelist, but I do have to say, as an alumni, I feel that like things are different now than when they were when I was a student. So thank you. Would anyone else like to add to kind of this conversation that we have going on right now? Like, I feel like this is important, but yeah. It's all good. Okay, next. So I do want to acknowledge that, yeah, we are not perfect. And I think that the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion across the board is a moving target that we're constantly trying to strive for. But at Lick, we're committed to educating and living out our DEI practices to ensure that every student feels a strong sense of belonging. So some of our members that we have on the panel today are leaders in this work, as we've heard from Primo and Yeshi and their clubs and their roles. So I wanted to hear from more leaders and ask why you decided to be a leader in DEI work in the communities that you're running. I'm gonna call on Jean.
Okay. So coming from the school I went to, it was like very primarily white and like it wasn't very woke per se. And so coming into Lick, I like wanted to find people that I could identify with my core identifiers. And so I joined Asia Club. That's what it used to be called. Which my sister was part of the leader group for. And so she told me to go, and I went there and I immediately like bonded with so many people, and I was able to find like upperclassmen as a freshman that I felt really comfortable talking to and getting advice from, and like they were so honest about everything that like I just like knew for like what I like that I wanted to be part of. And that was just like being able to help other people in the student community, whether it be like as a freshman or like later on now that I'm an upperclassman, like for the incoming freshmen, the like underclassmen. And so I wanted to become an Asia leader so that I could help do what I got as a freshman and even more. And especially now because of COVID, it's a lot harder for people to even like make friends, especially for the people who are freshmen and sophomores because they didn't get to fully have that experience. I feel like it was like really important to me that I was able to help people find like who they can like identify with even if they don't have any core identifiers in common, um, which is something I wanted to bring up about I'm pretty sure this is what it is for most of the affinity clubs too. Like you don't even have to identify as Asian to go to Asia Club. You can just go there to learn about different cultures, different experiences, history, etc., just to be able to appreciate the different backgrounds people come from and be able to see from different perspectives and understand what other people might be going through and like how they're living and all that kind of stuff, which is like really, really important to me. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that you know, that mentorship and then like going from being a mentee to being a mentor to students like you. I love that. Juliana, did you have anything else that you'd like to add or any thoughts about this, about why you became a leader?
Yeah, so freshman year when I started, I had like never really been to an affinity club like the other members here, but I decided to go to basically like as many clubs as I could, whether I identified like with them or if they're just like smoothie club or something like that. But I really went, I attended LU, which is what we call like Latinos Unidos, like pretty religiously. And as if like I had to go there and I always felt like super bad if I couldn't go, but honestly like clubs are not really for that. They're not supposed to be another class. It's about really finding like your own sense of community and like if you have the time and you have the energy and you want to join, then you're welcome to, of course. And I was really kind of unsure on whether I wanted to run for like the board. And I just realized like I really wanted to. I wanted to be part of the process of like planning events and creating like meetings for the rest of the community and like teaching the general Lick community about my own experiences. And so like my best friend and I, which we like met at the beginning of freshman year, we're still best friends. We kind of like talked to each other and we're like, okay, if you run, I'll run. And we both decided to, and then now we're co-presidents of Latinx Unidos, which I should say, we actually switched from Latinos to Latinx Unidos to make it more inclusive of like both the diversity within our own community and like gender diversity as well. But it's just, in Spanish, it's easier to say Latinos Unidos. And we made that switch at the beginning of last year. So yeah, as a leader, I mean, I really enjoyed being able to plan events and lead discussions as well. There are a lot of issues that are important both to the Latinx community at large, like in the United States or in the world, but also just at Lick. And we try to have discussions and like facilitate meetings that begin those discussions and continue the discussions, as well as just having like fun events like dance classes. And those are really fun. And a lot of people who aren't Latino come, especially like our food events. Like we have so many people come and they don't all identify with it, but it's really fun to have a ton of people like just making pupusas in a classroom during lunch. Yeah.
Thank you, Juliana. That brought like so much warmth to my heart hearing you talk about just some of the fun things that you do in Latinx Unidos. So kind of shifting towards the adult perspective in this. So I know I'm involved as a faculty advisor for the Black Student Union, but also Yeshi had mentioned that she is one of the leaders of Interrupting White Supremacy, which is an adult affinity space. So Yeshi, did you want to talk about some of the work that you do there, why you became a leader in that work, and maybe how you see some of the work in IWS translated into the classes that you teach?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I guess IWS started in like fits and starts a little bit. Kate Wiley, one of the administrators at school, started sort of like a smaller group, I think, before Trump was elected, before 2016. And it was basically sort of like a reading group to read a variety of texts specifically around anti-racism for white people. And then after the 2016 election, a group of us, I think Miss Wiley was on sabbatical, and we decided to sort of pick up the banner and keep it going. So for the last like 3 or 4 years, we've been having pretty regular meetings. And this is for white identifying adults on campus to do a couple of different things. One is to do some like internal work around learning and growing in our own development as people that benefit from white supremacy and are not always aware of it because of the way that white supremacy sort of pushes us to protect those benefits, whether consciously or unconsciously. And so a lot of the work in that group is about like internal growth and development. It's in some ways, it's really professional development for teachers. Although the nature of it, it's teacher-led and it's sort of extracurricular to some degree. So there's not, I think we're in a growing moment right now, especially in the wake of the uprisings this summer, of trying to figure out how to translate the group to becoming like a little bit more structural, to like make more structural change on campus and to have more of an impact as opposed to it being more of an internal facing. We're still doing that internal work, but we're trying to sort of navigate a transition to being more public. I don't think students really know we exist, or maybe it's like in a small way or just recently found out. But so some of the things we talk about are personal things like in our experiences as white people. We're trying to make those connections as explicit to the classroom as possible, especially for people that are teachers. It's not all teachers in the group, it's also other adults on campus. But I would say for me, I'm a history teacher, and anti-racism has been really central to my pedagogy since I started teaching, but have, there's just always more to learn and more to grow. So I think for me, some of the things that means is really trying to focus, like trying to decenter white history when I'm teaching history in particular, which doesn't mean not teaching about like the big stuff that happens, but trying to shift the lens a little bit and really focusing on contributions of people of color, and particularly when I'm teaching US history of Black people. And part of what that also means is really trying to lift up, and the history department as a whole is working on really trying to lift up stories of resistance to injustice, and not just stories of like victimization or, ways that like white supremacy harms, but also ways that people are resilient in the face of that. So that's something that I think has like IWS has pushed me towards, and also just the history department as a whole is working on. We also work with a document that I'll link here that was sort of the first document we really started with as a group that might be familiar to some people, from an author, Tema Okun, talking about white supremacy culture. And there's a lot of things on this list that are not necessarily things people think of as white supremacy, like immediately, but that really can sort of reinforce the status quo, right? So if white supremacy is the status quo, these are behaviors and attributes that keep us sort of in our normal behavior, as opposed to finding ways to interrupt. So these are attributes that we've been working with and trying to incorporate into our teaching, like slowing down when we need to, not always rushing through things, right? there's a decentering like the individual and trying to focus more on like collective success. There's a variety of things on there, but I don't want to take up too much more time. So that's that for now.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Yeshi. I think that's very important for our families to know and for our prospective students to understand about the classroom and the pedagogy of DEI work in the classroom. And the question I actually have for the students is like, have you seen some of this work, this DEI work that Yeshi is talking about in the classroom? Actually, Michael, like, what has your experience been with like learning about maybe anti-racism and white supremacy in your classes, or just anything DEI related, I guess?
Definitely. I guess I just like want to start off by saying that it like makes me feel very like emotional and like seen to know that like our teachers are like doing this kind of work. Like it's just like a very magical thing to be able to witness, and like it's just so like fulfilling to be surrounded by adult members who are like so committed to like really like guiding us through this work and doing the work themselves. Like it is as cool as it sounds. Like it's pretty awesome. And I guess like in terms of my personal experience with teachers and adult members, I was terrified to go to GSA, gender sexuality awareness, when I was a freshman. I was scared out of my mind, like not because of anything at Lick, just because like I was a small freshman and I was scared of everything. And like the reason I like started going is because my music teacher, like Mr. Asaro, was just like so like welcoming to me. He was like, oh, you know, Michael, like I actually am one of the like teacher advisors of this club. And I had registered, but like I had never gone to a meeting. And so like he and the other student leaders like actually like sat down with me and like had conversations with me about like here's how we're here to support you, and like it's gonna be okay, and like if you need anything, like we're always here for you. And like that's why I started going to meetings, and that's why I'm a leader now, is because they were able to I can think of like 5 different Lick teachers off the top of my head who have in addition to the student leaders of GSA, who have like guided me through my you know, my self-acceptance process, and also my journey to like becoming a leader in like the student community. So I think the network of student leaders combined with teachers and faculty members doing this kind of work is really what makes the community so special for me.
Thank you, Michael. And that brings me to like such an important question. Like, since a lot of you are leaders now, when you first came to Lick, obviously you weren't leaders in these spaces. So like what made you feel a sense of belonging or a sense of value when you first got here? And I know Primo, you're a transfer student, but like what encouraged you to become a leader and confident in the work that you're doing today?
I actually think I can build off what you just mentioned in your question. So I am a transfer student. I transferred in junior year. So this is actually marks a little more than a year that I've been at Lick. And yet in this year, the community of students at Lick has allowed me to step into leadership positions on the school newspaper, on the literary magazine, as one of our leaders for our other queer affinity space on campus. And then of course, as student inclusion chair on student council. And I think that that really speaks to, I mean, personally, just to like preface that, I was really amazed when I got to Lick, because in transferring high schools a lot, I was really looking for a place where I could find community and could do DEI work where I felt that it would actually make concrete change in the community and in the school. And when I arrived at Lick, I think that I really found that Lick was the community and the place where I could do that. And so I was surprised and joyous even to discover that as a transfer student, as a first year, I could run for student government. And then even more surprised when I was elected. And so I just think that that speaks to the community at Lick. And then now working on student council with the current co-presidents who were last year's student inclusion co-chairs. I just think that there are so many students, even beyond just the four of us who are here today, who are really dedicated to DEI work and to making their voices heard and are not afraid to challenge the school as a whole when it comes to things that might not be satisfactory or appropriate to them within the school environment. I might have veered away from the question, I apologize, but that was where my train of thought carried me.
No, that's perfect. And that's totally fine. I think it's important to like get out your feelings about the institution in whatever way that means to you. So thank you. And I actually had a question for Carrie, like how do you foster like that sense of belonging that, you know, students are talking about in your classroom? Kind of like an add-on there. So we actually had another question come in this morning that was, how does diversity impact the way you teach non-humanitarian subjects like math and science? So maybe you can kind of fit that into your cultivating a sense of belonging, or maybe treat them as two questions, however you'd like.
I think about the sense of belonging that's played in, especially with us being doing distance learning. We were very much educated around the idea of relationship before task in our professional development last year, our faculty meetings. And I feel like that was a little bit my nature anyway, but then I've become super intentional about it, trying to make sure that I have a connection with the students of like the classes are beginning now with them making videos of themselves, answering all sorts of questions about their background, their preferences, etc. And then they're all journaling so I can talk back and forth to them. So the idea of relationship before task is one of the main ways. The other thing is to echo back to what Yeshi is saying about the group she runs, the Interrupting White Supremacy. I think that some of the times when people get hurt, it's because of rushing. I've noticed that in myself, that our society as a whole and maybe independent schools value perfectionism and extroversion and just being loud, and that it happens in little tiny moments where it's after class and some student is just taking up a lot of space and other people are getting hurt, and that I'm just learning to be more aware that that's when it happens, is little small moments, and hopefully trying to interrupt it and make the people that would have been getting hurt not be as hurt or not be hurt at all. The second question is about science and inclusion. Is that what the second question was?
Yeah, how do you encourage DEI practices in, you know, math and science fields, right? STEM fields that like it's easy to incorporate learning those or valuing those things in like a humanitarian class, like an English or a history, maybe less so for science and math, I guess. So how have you seen that work in, you know, STEM field?
Yeah, so I can speak most about the things I teach, but I will try to honor all the things my colleagues are doing as well. I think that curriculum is very finite, like what we can cover in the time we have. And so people are making choices to value, for example, I know in bio, they are spending a lot of time on environmental justice, so as to value, you know, a field that, or a subject that doesn't get as much publicity or hasn't in the past, but is incredibly important. In the A&P class, I'm trying to do more of what I call blind spots in medicine. So like famous studies where if you look back at them, they actually had primarily white and male participants, and therefore the study itself is not as valid or isn't valid at all. And then this year, because of COVID, I'm hoping to do a lot around inequities in access to healthcare, access to an environment where you could have clean water, clean air, etc., that affects your health outcomes. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but those are the kinds of efforts.
Yeah, and kind of like a follow-up question, like so I was a student in your class, and I identify as a Black woman, and I actually pursued a degree in biochemistry. So along with that, like how do you think you're empowering and affecting underrepresented identities in the STEM field to pursue further studies in the STEM field?
I think it's a hard balance to strike without having it look like tokenism. And that, so for example, we had 4 young Black males from SF General come in and teach everyone to suture. And so I try to do like things like that, but there's a danger of tokenizing. Basically to have people come in, but have it, not representing white people is also lack of diversity as well. So I try to do large numbers of role models of all sorts of identifiers. And then luckily for your generation, there's more and more internships in the summer that are just for basically it's more of an economic focus, but so I try to recommend as many people as I can to internships that are designed for population that wouldn't necessarily otherwise have access to working with a doctor at UCSF in the summer, etc.
Thank you, Carrie. Actually, on that topic of like financial status and socioeconomic status, are there students who have experience with like the flexible tuition program at Lick, and like what kind of the school's value on access is when it comes to like financial things or resources and things like that? Actually, I'm gonna call on Juliana for this one because you haven't talked in a while.
So I will start up. My family is on flex. My sister and I are both on flexible tuition. But so coming from my middle school, was independent school in the city, there's a lot of wealth. There's a lot of money, and I didn't really know the difference between like me and like other students because it just kind of felt the same until we were applying to high schools. And then I realized that like getting into a high school was going to be a lot more difficult for me than it was for a lot of my peers. And that kind of made a difference. And I saw how a lot of my friends who were also on flex ended up not being at schools that they wanted to go to because they didn't get enough money, or they would get in, but not with money. And so it was impossible for them to go there. And that was really sad. But coming to Lick, like the number of people, like the percentage wise, like twice of what it was at my old school. And so now like, even though I'm on flex, like I still feel like I still see a lot more economic diversity, and I acknowledge like the privilege that I have. And Lick is a very expensive school. Tuition is like as much as many colleges are, or even more than that. And like not being able to pay for Lick doesn't mean that you're like poor. Like I realize that like my family has a lot of privilege and a lot of aspects of that, and I'm also really grateful that I can go to Lick as well. But at the same time, like there should definitely be more. Like Lick has a lot of resources, and I wish that they could be spread to more people. And that's something that it's kind of like I go back and forth in my head where like I have the chance to like go here, and a lot of my friends do as well. But at the same time, it's like, why can't this be afforded to other people? But in terms of like the flex tuition program, there's a wide range of like money like that can be distributed. So not everyone who's on Flex isn't paying anything. Like Flex doesn't mean that you aren't paying full, it just means that you aren't paying the full amount. And so in that sense, it's just because you're on Flex, it doesn't mean anything about you. And there isn't like really like a stark division. You can't really tell like who's on Flex or who isn't. Just nice only if like people really talk about it, which honestly isn't something that comes up super often. But I'd say at least with my family's experience with Flex, there's also flexibility in what can be given. So when I originally got into Lick, I was not offered enough money to go, and another school offered me like $30,000 more per year, and it was, I mean, by those, like by the original like admissions things, like I was not gonna go to Lick at all. But talking with admissions and talking with the admissions director at Lick, we were able to like figure out something that worked for my family. And I was really glad to be able to go to Lick because it was my first choice. And I've been really happy. I guess I've been happy here, and I'm glad that those resources are available to a lot of those students and for students who are accepted.
And building off of that, I did want to mention that Flex does extend beyond just tuition. And so students on Flex can receive other financial support from the school, and that can include paying for public transportation, or at least when we were on campus before, it can include school materials and even like reduced ticket prices to school dances. And so what Flex encompasses extends into all possible areas of student experience attending Lick.
Thank you both. I think that's so important. I think it's really important to acknowledge the socioeconomic differences, but also like, you know, all of the different resources that we have for, and accessible resources that we have for folks. Primo, you talked briefly about like transportation, and I know we actually have folks commuting from different areas. So would anyone like to speak to like what commute looks like and like what, you know, like what that might look for you, and like how are there other people that commute at the school? Cool. Okay. I know there's some folks who are commuters, so.
Should I jump on here? I don't have the student experience, but I commute from Oakland and I take BART, and when I first started at Lick like 7 years ago, it was really nice because it wasn't as crowded as it was right before the pandemic started. So it's definitely like a crowded train in the morning, but it's also a time when I get work done. And I think I know I always see students on BART like finishing their homework right before my class, and I'm like, I'm gonna see you in 5 minutes. But I don't know what else you're looking for. It's relatively easy. It's a long commute, but it's like a straight shot, at least from where I am in Oakland. So yeah, I mean, it definitely gets exhausting as the year plows ahead, but it's also makes the school really accessible.
And I think just sort of like rounding us back around to DEI, that a lot of times, or at least in my experience and talking with students who attend other independent schools within the Bay Area, like geographic location can sometimes be like a challenge in terms of attending school, both like literally physically in terms of distance, but then also thinking about the neighborhoods that people attend independent schools from. And I think that at Lick, we definitely see a diversity of neighborhoods from across the Bay Area. And so if that was something that prospective students are concerned about, I would say that your geographic location will not impact your experience at LWHS. You'll meet people who might be from your same geographic location, and will also have the opportunity to connect with people from many different places within the Bay Area.
I would also say that like students who take BART in particular tend to like form little BART groups. So that's like another affinity space. It's not like a core identifier, but there's lots of bonding that happens on the train when you see people at the same stop every time.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for in that question. So thank you. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want everyone to answer this question. I'm wondering, so we've mentioned many challenges that we face in our community, but we've also talked about some growth. So I'm wondering, maybe personally, or in our community, how have you seen that growth in learning and valuing DEI? And Sue Jean, if you would like to start us off, that'd be great.
So at my time at Lick, well, I have one less year than most of the people on the student panel, but they're like, obviously we've mentioned that Lick has had its challenges and it's not like perfect, as is every school. But what I've seen in terms of like growth and that kind of stuff, like I feel like whenever there is some type of challenge in terms of DEI, like I don't know, like small like racism or microaggression like within the walls, what I've seen is that the students, we do really step up and we like to speak out against these things, which is something I really do appreciate. Like it's not, I would say that it's like a very student like led kind of diversity and like awareness kind of situation at Lick. And one specific incident that I like remember is like there was an anonymous letter sent from like a couple students to the administration about issues concerning like racism and like within Lick's walls. And in response to that, we had this board that was in the hallway, and everyone could just anonymously write their experiences on that thing, on like the wall that everyone could see. And it was like a way of bringing awareness to issues, which I feel like is a really important thing to like not just like have a response and be like, oh yeah, we apologize for that like thing. It's just like bringing awareness to it in the first place. To like, for me, that's like a really big win in my book, that we're able to so openly speak about these things and accept that it's happening and grow from that and be able to improve and that kind of thing, which is, I feel like, a really big like step in growth in DEI. And I know that Lick continues to grow in that kind of aspect of just being very open and like aware of the things that are happening in the world and in the school, like just like being able to talk about sensitive topics that some other places might consider taboo. Like I really do think that like that's something that like places Lick differently than like some other schools, is just like how friggin' like open we are about things that we do face and the challenges that are like existing within our school walls. So yeah.
If I could just step in, I didn't want to let our lovely attendees leave without actually like citing and letting you all know about some of the actual concrete work that is happening. Since, you know, we've been talking about like the work that students are doing. So I just wanted to give you all a little window into what some of that work actually is before you leave. And so this is all from my perspective as student inclusion chair. I'm sure there are many other things happening within other constituent groups within the Lit community in terms of like admin and faculty and staff and the parent association. But on the student side, we're currently working on an assaultive language policy that deals with how derogatory language and identity-based slurs should be handled both in and out of the classroom, and a policy that will determine consequences for the use of assaultive language within the school community. We're also currently working on a gender inclusive policy that will set norms and regulations throughout the school community for how transgender and non-binary identifying students can feel most comfortable and accepted in terms of normalizing pronouns, name changes, that sort of thing. We're also currently overseeing the creation of an ethnic studies requirement, which will manifest itself as, we hope, an ethnic studies class as a required class for students at Lick in order to foster more connection and understanding and empathy between students in our community. We are also implementing a restorative justice practices program at Lick as an alternative to traditional punitive justice. As we've seen this year, traditional justice systems are not always the way to go. And so we are pivoting to restorative justice through the help of both students and faculty members. And I think through all of these policies, many of which have been student-led and student-proposed and are being created by students as we speak, like literally the actual policy language is being written by students. I think through all of that, we can see that like there is work happening and concrete things that we can identify. And I just wanted to share that with you all briefly so that you know and can think of things that are happening here at LWHS.
If I can just piggyback on that super fast, I also want to mention that like Prima said, like students are at the center of all these initiatives, and like a lot of these kind of like spring out of our own, you know, desire to make the school better. Like no one was like, okay, group of students, how about you make this policy? Like it was no, like there was like an incident or like just a general desire to make things better, and then like students stepped up to the plate, and like that can be you, like whatever high school you end up at, like it's like anyone can do this kind of work. And I think it's so special that like gives us the space to be able to do that work. But like anyone can do it.
Thank you. That's so lovely. I'd open it up. I did initially say everyone, but we may not have time to get to everyone. So maybe one, maybe two more folks who want to speak on the growth that they've seen maybe within themselves or within the Lit community.
I just have noticed that the adult community has become more responsive to the students and responds faster. Like there was a very clear feedback in this past few years that we needed to respond to each incident of police brutality quickly and as a whole community, and that it wasn't okay to be slow or to say, wait for a while, we need to make our response more perfect. We just had to respond. So that's growth, I think.
I also think that there's been some really great hiring in the last few years of really awesome new members of the community that I think you mentioned earlier.
I would say just in like feeling more comfortable in talking about these different topics. Starting up in high school, I didn't really talk about it and I didn't see as much conversation about it, but as now as like nationally the conversation shifts and also as we just mature like in our school and as students as well. Just feeling comfortable talking about the issues at hand, and whether that's like in a classroom setting or just like outside of school as well, like being a club leader, talking to other club leaders. There's more space to talk to other affinity club leaders. So we have like meetings, like just like affinity club leaders, and like having like creating club meetings that incorporate issues that don't affect just one community, but multiple communities at a time. I know like, it's funny though, my family isn't really about this, but my mom now is like on the equity, like DEI, like parent board. So she's also working with like the Parents Association and like finding and like moving towards DEI through the parent angle. And my sister is like an intern for the Center for Civic Engagement. And so she's working on like the ethnic studies curriculum and how to bring that up to the school. And so like we're all like working on different things, at least in my household, but it's really about, there are a lot of different angles that we're going through. So it's not just students, but also teachers and parents, and there's definitely a goal that we're all like working. It's definitely something that we're all doing together, and there's a lot of support in each of those communities.
Thank you all so much. Yes, so we're about at time, but thank you all so much. Panelists, like huge thank you. You all were so great in sharing your experiences. Primo brought up a really great point in the chat that like we want to acknowledge that this panel is being held on a day that's, you know, a huge, what may seem like a huge victory for us with DEI work. I also want to add on that the work is still, we still need to do more work. And that's in the world, but that's also within the Lick community as well. So again, DEI work is a moving target for us all. And
like your cat.
That's my cat, yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a target, it's a moving target, and we're constantly working on, you know, improving our work. So again, thank you all so much for coming here. We're going to quickly plug our YouTube. This is being recorded, so please visit our YouTube for all of our other panels. Also, we have this great program that I think Primo brought up earlier called Connect with the Tiger Ambassador. So if you want to connect with one of these students here, or even a parent regarding, you know, all of the, or just like anything in our Lit community, like feel free to sign up for this Connect with the Tiger Ambassador. And lastly, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email us at admissions@LWHS. Those things were supposed to show up in the chat. Oh, perfect, they did. Quickly copy and paste it if you're an attendee. If not, thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye.